Everyone, we're going to call tonight's meeting to order. We're going to start with an approval of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda and any addendums for the September 11th council meeting be approved. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Stevens and Councillor McIntosh, questions or comments? All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none, tonight we had no closed meeting, so we are going to go straight into our open meeting, and we're going to begin with the singing of our national anthem. So if you are able, please rise.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and the Haudenosaunee and is home to many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Any member of the public who's connecting via telephone is reminded to please press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Tonight we have no rise and report, but we are looking for a recommendation that the minutes of the following council meeting be approved. It's the August 14th council meeting minutes. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews and Deputy Mayor Taylor. Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We'll head straight into our petitions, presentations, and delegations. And we have had a last-minute addition that I need the leave of council for. Ms. Graciela Cardenas Mustafa is here and would like to delegate tonight. So I do need a motion from council to have her added to the agenda. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Stevens. Questions or comments? All in favor? And that's carried. So Ms. Mustafa, you will be added to 11.8. So we will start with Kelly McDowell, who is presenting on behalf of the Dufferin Film Festival. Kelly, if you want to head up to the front, just turn on the mic there and have a seat, and the floor is yours.
Oh, it's on. Okay, great. So this is my first time having presenting digitally, so I'm hoping that I get some help. I thought it was the blue button I'm supposed to press, but I'm not sure. Let's share content. Is this correct? Do I have it shared now? Okay, wonderful. Honorable Mayor and Council, I'm here to present you with the Dufferin Film Festival. I did provide a PowerPoint presentation in the package that you received, and that was to prepare you to see in advance what we're planning. This is an event that we have planned for August 9th and 10th, hopefully, in 2024, and we want to host it here in Orangeville and eventually spread out throughout Dufferin County. The event itself is planned for only 2 days for the first year to be respectful of the fact that we are just starting out. I come to you as an experienced event manager, as a nonprofit and for-profit worker in both the arts and culture sector and in municipal government. I have run many events through a long period of time through my career, and I find that in Dufferin, we are an amazing town for having cultural events and community events, and there is some spaces and gaps where we could fill. And I'm hoping that the Dufferin Film Festival will do that for us. We're not only looking to attract other film industry people, but also film enthusiasts, arts enthusiasts, cultural enthusiasts, as well as our tourism base that we already have and our local community. The event itself is planned for Friday evening and Saturday throughout the day. We are hoping to include the Theatre Orangeville or Orangeville Opera House as the main venue, as well as have confirmed that we're going to have our networking event on the Friday at the Bluebird Cafe and Grill, and multiple film events on the Saturday here at Opera House, as well as workshops, networking events, and feature breakfast events. I wanted to answer any questions that you had here today about the event itself. I'm hoping I know how to move forward pages here. And I do not, because I was planning on using my own computer. So the event itself, I'm trying to collaborate or have collaborated with multiple people and community groups and businesses, and have received a lot of support. Not only has the Bluebird Cafe and Grill supported us, but I've also worked with, over the last 9 months, the Dufferin Arts Council, Shirley Boxham, who's just assigned as executive director, as well as Warren Maycock. I have spoken with Katrina Lemaire, and met with her and Vicky to discuss tourism and how that would work, or if it would work within our community, and how they felt about the event itself, to see if it was viable. I've spoken with David Nairn as well, as he's involved in multiple community groups and is excellent as arts and cultural promotion and involvement. I have met with Sarah Grata from the Central Counties Tourism, who is very supportive of the event and has already started sending me grants and ideas of financial support, as well as backing of media support through us leading into this event. Monday Night at the Movies as well, very supportive and are willing to come on board. Alison Scheel from BIA, the Orangeville Library, Darla Fraser, Streams Community Hub is getting involved, as well as the Dufferin Board of Trade have been very accommodating towards us, as well as other venues in town that we are currently confirming. So this event, we eventually plan on spreading out through Dufferin County, but in the primary year, we're focusing on local businesses and local community groups within Orangeville as the central kind of hub for Dufferin. And we want to encourage and support those businesses in being involved in the event in any way possible, and ensure that we are using and utilizing all of our everything that we hire out of our local area. I would go through the entire presentation, but I don't want to take up too much of council's time, so I prefer to answer questions if anybody has any questions about the event or about myself as an event manager or my background.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I've heard about this event and I'm super excited that you're here tonight and finally sharing that this is going to happen. So two sort of tongue-in-cheek things. One is, I don't know if everybody realizes we have a celebrity presenting to us right now. First of all, you've been in some very famous Orangeville videos. All right, so kudos to you. But secondly, it's interesting to see about the directors, and people get excited about who potentially, you would be having. Is there anybody that you can share as an example of who would be coming?
So currently we're working with so myself and my partner actually run Rose Digital Media Group, which is a local production company. We not only work in film and short film, but we also do commercial productions. Through that and through my previous acting career, we have met a lot of contacts within the industry, from all the way from LA to the UK and within our Canada, BC, Toronto base. Currently, we're confirming names for our workshops and presenters. Our critics are starting to get confirmed now, and those are people that are actually experienced within the industry, and we'll be announcing those shortly.
Thank you, Kelly. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Ms. McDowell, thank you so much for being here. It's a brilliant idea. I think this is, something that our community is going to, from an economic perspective, really end up, fostering from. And I think that you've certainly touched base with the right people. There are others there within our community, our artistic community, film community, that will no doubt take note of this tonight, but also any other information that you've shared within the community. Having a bit of a background from Hot Docs and other media-related exposés like this, tapping into also some of the young film makers too as well. I know that our education system here locally has some young filmmakers. That may be something down the road. But from a venue perspective, one thing that, as you ended up talking about it after looking at your presentation here, you may also want to take a look at some of the venues that might be able to accommodate. I know that you take a look at some of the smaller venues, but there may be other venues within our community. Even some of the churches that exist within town may have the right setting for you to showcase some of those, depending on the number of evenings, or not the number of evenings, but the number of films that you have. So if you're looking for additional support in any way, shape, and form, don't hesitate to contact me too as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So
ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, may I mention that also we are launching on the September 28th. Because I'm in the council tonight, the banner has released the information a little bit early, but what you will be hearing about is we are having a screenwriting contest. So we are completely only accepting local applications. We're encouraging youth and adults to apply. And through that competition, Rose Digital Media Group is coming on as a partner to purchase those scripts from the youth and from the adult that win. And we'll be producing those full production within Orangeville, and they'll launch at the festival. We also have been talking to actually a local church as well as some other venues, because we're hoping in future years that we can spread the event a little bit out more, maybe 3 to 4 days, and eventually have smaller films being shown, possibly producing local films with like our group, as well as working with Stream Hubs and other groups to bring in workshops in advance so that our local film community can grow even more.
Thank you, Kelly. Was there additional questions from any members of council? Seeing none. Nick and Kelly, I just want to thank you both for being here and for making this presentation. I think it's really admirable to watch local entrepreneurs take a risk and take a challenge in creating a new event. It's what makes our community so vibrant. Everybody loves all of our events, and the more that we can add and create signature events like this, the better off we are as a community. So thank you for taking a leap and putting this together. I think it sounds like an awesome event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Heather Hayes, the Executive Director of the Orangeville Food Bank, joining us to update an annual report for Hunger Awareness Month. Heather, the floor is yours. You're no stranger to this one. Go ahead. You know how to get the mic on, have a seat.
I don't know that I know how to get the mic on, but my voice is carries on its own. So thank you so much for having me today. There we go. My name is Heather Hayes. I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of the Orangeville Food Bank. And we've been in business now for 31 years. We have 180 fabulous volunteers that support the food bank and donate over 24,000 hours this year alone to the work that we do. We have a staff that goes above and beyond every day to ensure that the food bank is organized, welcoming, and a soft, gentle place to land on a hard day. So last year I was here. I believe I presented, my presentation started with the system is crap and we need money. And you heard us. You heard the plight of the food bank. And you pledged support of $25,000 annually for the term of council. So I'm here to say thank you to you for that. That's pretty incredible. So when I was here in April, you guys made sure that the food bank was supported, and you're helping us to become a community that thrives. So thank you for that, and to all the other not-for-profits that you're supporting right now too. So in April, when I presented, I anticipated a 40% increase at a minimum by December of this year in the need for our services. In the last 5 months, we've seen a 21% increase. And so in August, we served 1,151 people. That's astounding. 364 of those were children, 288 of those were seniors. That's a huge increase. So we know that the fall and winter months will have additional costs associated with them. We know that heating, clothing, and food will push people close to the line, needing even more support. So we saw a 78% increase in the number of individuals who indicate their primary source of income is employment. Just in the last 5 months, that's 160 people accessing the food bank who work. That's so much higher than it ever has been before. As I said, 78%. And they can't make their bills and feed themselves at the same time. It's ridiculous. In the increase, the increase that we see on the horizon, we've looked at new ways to get food out there. And I walked past the vending machine, which is fantastic. We're very excited about this program. It is a vending machine that council has gratefully accepted hosting of right now as the library is under renovations. And everything in that vending machine is 25 cents. It is filled with nutritious food, with great meals. They're made by our chef and volunteers. And we're really excited about this. And the reason we decided to come up with this is because there are times people can't get to us. So we wanted to make sure that food was close to downtown, that people would have access to it. And at times I was asked, well, anybody can access that machine. Yep, that's the whole point, because we want it to be not us versus them. We're all in this together. So we're very excited about this. We also launched the Neighbors Market. So this is a pay what you can produce market in Grand Valley and Shelburne. So it is a weekly market where people can come, they can purchase their produce at either market rate or at a discounted rate that they get to choose quietly, and they can still purchase their produce. We did it in Grand Valley and Shelburne because we know that it's important to make sure that our rural communities are taken care of as well. Orangeville has lots of food programs, not so much in the rural communities. So we really wanted to make sure that people had the option of getting inexpensive food and healthy and nutritious food. So we also support smaller food banks, food pantries, and community agencies on an annual basis. Last year, we distributed 91,000 pounds of food out to those agencies. Why do we support other food programs? You know, I've been asked this, why don't we just take care of our core people coming through the food bank? Because when we work together, we're stronger. When communities thrive and build on the strengths of each other, that's how we get things done in Dufferin. So last year, we distributed 500,000 pounds of food. That's 500,000 pounds of food out of the food bank last year. That's 100,000 pounds of food more than the year before. That's astounding. As a target, this year, we're going to need 650,000 pounds of food to meet that increase. It's an incredible amount. And it's really important that we make sure that our warehouse functions properly. And we have the fabulous Carrie Ann DiCaprio, our newest warehouse coordinator, joining us today. We're so excited to have her. So she's one of our brand new staff. She replaces Willie Brown. You all know Willie Brown. Willie has been our volunteer warehouse manager for forever, and he couldn't do 5 days a week. It's not reasonable to expect that a volunteer would be able to do that. So we're so blessed to have Carrie with us. And she also farts rainbows too, just like Lori. So yay, it's a theme in our food bank. The other thing that's happening right now is that we're looking for space. We are running out of space in our warehouse. If anybody knows of any temperature controlled warehouse space in our area, we would love to hear about it. We don't think that we're going to be able to accommodate the number of people that we're going to see and hold food in our lobby, which is what we traditionally do, or the volunteer room. So that would be great. We would really appreciate that. So in my office, I have a framed postcard of a piece of art by Banksy. I think most people are familiar with the name of Banksy. It's a young man sitting on a sidewalk covered by a blanket. He's holding up a cup with the words, "I don't need coins, I need change." So it reminds me that food banks are not the answers. I've told you all the fabulous things that we're doing, and I wish we didn't have to do them. So we're not the answer. This is Hunger Action Month that is supported by Feed Ontario and Food Banks Canada. And we're here to advocate for the government to invest in adequate income supports and to pull back the clawbacks from programs like OW. And a quote from Feed Ontario, "Food banks have become increasingly relied upon to fill gaps created by poor public policy. They are failing to meet the needs of Ontarians, in particular those relying on social assistance, those with precarious employment, and those who face unaffordable housing costs, and those of marginalized communities." These stories at the food bank get harder and harder to hear. They become more and more complex. We knew that after we came out of the pandemic, that people really can only manage a pandemic for about 3 years. And then all of the resources that they have no longer exist. They've drawn all of them down. And that's where we're at right now. We are 3 years past that. There aren't the resources that people need anymore to support themselves. So we need real solutions for food insecurity, okay? Not the Band-Aids of what food banks are. So I get asked all the time, how can you support the food bank? So we need money. We need money. We need money to purchase the perishable foods, and we need money to run the food bank. While Orangeville Hydro is extremely supportive of the food bank, they still like to be paid on a monthly basis. Or consider putting in a team for Coldest Night of the Year. That's our largest fundraising event. It's really imperative to our financial budget overall in the year. So it's a great event. It supports the food bank and it raises awareness for the hungry, hurting, and homeless in our community. Food, we're always going to need non-perishables, as well as hygiene items and cleaning supplies. You can drop them off at any local grocery store or at the food bank between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday. And fabulous Carrie will meet you in the back along with our volunteers to receive the food. What do we need? We need the same things that are in your grocery cart. We need cooking oil. Name a meal that does not start with some kind of fat. You can't do it, right? If you're making dinner, what do you start with? You start with ghee, you start with butter, you start with oil, something. We never get that kind of thing. Things like canned pasta, school snacks, pasta sauce, canned fruit, the same things that your family's eating, same things we need at the food bank. So we also love donations of fresh produce. Our zucchini awareness campaign has really come along nicely this year. We've only received one 10-pound zucchini, so good on you. Good job for recognizing the problem. And volunteers. We are always on the hunt for wonderful souls to join our volunteer team. Currently, we have weekly and bi-weekly opportunities available. We would love to have you come and play along with our little sunshine and lollipops. Although I say lollipops, we all know it's ice cream and corny jokes that bring the volunteers back. So as I finish up my presentation, I'd like to quote Theodore Roosevelt. This country will not be a permanently good place for any of us to live in unless we make it a reasonably good place for all of us to live in. So thank you to the community. I'm going to stand for this part because this is really important. Like you'd stand for the national anthem. I want to stand to recognize all of you, and I want to stand to recognize all of you. You support the food bank. Without your donations, without the food that comes through the back door, we cannot do what we do every day, and you make it possible. The other thing you do is you make our community strong. You make Dufferin a place where we all get together and we figure out how to support each other. So from our hearts, our volunteers and staff, to you, thank you. And thank you for what you do for our community. So.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's always a pleasure to have you delegating to our council. I'm going to open the floor up to questions from council. Anybody have questions? No? I just want to make one comment. I spend an awful lot of time at town hall, and the food vending machine that's out there has really done an amazing job of changing the conversation. And I think that's been such a powerful thing. So thank you to you and your team for always finding ways to innovate and make it better.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Heather.
Great day.
Up next, we have Rob Howes from regarding Orangeville Towing and Recovery Services, Towing Services and Vehicle Storage Yard Bylaw. Come on up. We'll make sure that the mic is on for you if you just want to have a seat. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to start with a couple of thank yous off the bat before we get into the nitty gritty. Personally, Todd Taylor, our deputy mayor, has done a super job of reaching out to my industry, the towing industry. And it's nice to have somebody on board that, I know he's only one vote, but it's nice to have somebody on board that would even listen to you. A lot of people don't think about towing until they're at the side of the road, and then it's like, now what am I going to do? But anyhow, thank you, Todd, for that. You've been great for years now, actually. We have a towing bylaw in town, and I have to tell you, I'm awfully upset about the way the whole thing got handled. The two previous councils told me personally that I would be involved in the in that aspect of the writing up of the bylaw. And to this day, nobody in my industry in this town was involved in that procedure whatsoever. And that's part of the problem why we're in this predicament here today that we are. We had suggested a few things that maybe hold off because MTO is coming out with a program, which they have. And now we're catching wind that the town's going to squash the bylaw on December 31st of 23. Meanwhile, us guys in this industry, in this town, have gone through hurdles and a lot of expense for nothing. And I'm not going to get into all that. It wasn't fair. And now they're squashing something that hasn't even been into effect for a whole year. So basically what I'm looking for. We have a situation where the guys in this town that live and work in this town contributed to the bylaw. We have guys in the county that didn't get licensed whatsoever, and we're still getting rotated by the OPP that, you know, that was a separate incident. So now we have guys that don't even have pounds in this area. We had to pay for pounds, we had to pay for signage, we had to, you name it, we had to do it. And we have other guys that are getting the same revenue and charging more because they're not under this bylaw. If the bylaw is going to be squashed, I'd like to see us get our money back because it wasn't handled properly. And I brought Zach Cameron from Cameron Services to bring up a couple of points also. And if you have any questions after, I'm more than willing to talk to you about it.
Sure. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Sorry, could you just state your name as well when you have a seat?
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's Zach Cameron. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us on this. Just to reiterate a bit of what Rob spoke about, I agree with the reimbursement of some sort on our end for going through everything we have on this and the fact that it's going to be repealed in less than a year, according to the report that's going to be unveiled tonight. As to what percent of reimbursement, I'd leave that up to you guys. Also, in this report that is supposed to be presented tonight, it references provincial oversight and everything coming into effect with that to overlap and take over and to possibly amend some of the existing bylaw. In short, with that, it really dumps everything on OPP and on companies in the area to kind of make logistical sense of everything that's put into effect with this. I would ask that if you're going to repeal it at the end of the year, to just repeal it immediately and not make it more complicated than it is and has been thus far for everybody involved. That's all I have to add to that.
Thank you for your comments. Was there any questions from council? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Mr. Howes, can you just remind us what are you asking for in terms of money? What is that?
You will need to come up to the mic, please.
I can tell you that this bylaw cost me well over $1,000. The signage we had to do, the criminal searches, the driver's abstract, the CVORs, the paying for a compound. There's shared compounds. We're limited with compounds in the town to start with. So each compound has more than one company in it. So collecting revenue from that they were already collecting revenue from, charging for licenses. Okay, they put our picture on a plastic card. Never once in the last year has an OPP officer asked me to see my license. Never once has an officer looked on the back of my truck to see if my truck and myself was licensed. So I can tell you that I had to pay the town $810 to run a service in town that were 24/7. There's no other services in town that run like that. But yet we had to pay that kind of money for something. And I think part of the problem is that they come out with this to protect the consumer. I don't think there was one consumer that got looked after any better than they did before, but you know. So I would like to at least get half my money back, to be honest with you. I don't think that's outrageous whatsoever.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you have a follow-up? You're good. Any additional questions? Seeing none. Ms. Khan, did you want to make comment at all?
Through you, Mayor Post, I can make comments now, or perhaps maybe when we get to the report, if that's all right.
Sure, we can wait till then. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. House.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Ian McSweeney, who is the Vice Chair of the Police Services Board, to do a presentation on behalf of the PSB. Welcome, Mr. McSweeney. Mic is on. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be brief. If we could just have the slide deck up. Thank you. So the next slide, please. So for a good period of time, I can't remember exactly when we started, the Police Services Board has been working on a board governance framework reform project. And we are nearing the end, I'm glad to say, and it is working out extremely well. Just to remind you, for purposes of today, the context is that the board is an oversight board and it's governed by certain sections of the Police Services Act and the Adequacy Standards Regulation. There's also an agreement between the town and the OPP that impacts our governance process as well. Our goal from the outset, and it continues to be our goal, is to develop a board governance framework which exhibits best practices. For those of you that know about anything about governance, you'll know there's no one right answer. There's probably a range of possible best practices, and there are many concerns that factor into the framework that ends up getting selected. There could be regional and other differences. So what we've done is we've taken into account what our community needs are, what our board resources are, and we put together a best practices framework on that basis. Next slide. So here it is, just to show you. So it starts out, there's an overarching memo which sets the context. And part of the advantage of this is that it provides an institutional memory for future boards, so they know what they're doing, as opposed to coming in, picking up the legislation and trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing by reading, non-lawyers for the most part, reading legislation and regulations. So an overarching memo, and attached to that memo are our bylaws, the board bylaws, and there's 2 of them. And then we have 20 policies. And these policies, for the most part, reflect the requirements of the legislation and the adequacy standards regulations. But we've also added a few extra ones in, which we think will be of benefit to try to improve the best practices aspect of what we're doing. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through all 20 policies. You'll be happy to hear, but there are certain policies that impact town council, I think, more than others. And I'm not going to go through those in detail either, but just to give you an example, we have a media relations and public transparency policy. Public transparency is a sort of a running theme with this board and with many of the boards in the province, figuring out how to push things from an in-camera confidential setting into the public domain to improve the transparency that must exist within the community between not only the board and the community, but the board and the police service, the community and the police services. We have a freedom of information and protection of privacy policy, and these numbers, these D3 numbers, they just correspond to the section in the memo that deals with them. So we've tried to sort of take everything so you can easily go from whatever, this presentation or any part of the policies and find the policy itself or a reference to it in another document. We have the detachment commander selection and evaluation policy, and I can tell you, having just gone on August 28th through the Dufferin detachment commander interview process, there are some things that the OPP have in its interview template that I'm trying to extract from them. It was difficult to do it in the context of the interview process because it was difficult to sort out what was private, confidential, and what wasn't. But Veronica Eaton, who's the, I think, Eastern Inspector for the Ontario region of the OPP, I forget her exact title, she's committed to providing me with those details. So these are living policies. We will be changing them and reviewing them constantly. We're going to take what she gives us and we're going to amend that policy as well. Sharing of crime, call and public disorder analysis, we have a policy on that. Next slide. So this business planning policy is perhaps one of the most misunderstood requirements of the adequacy standards regulation. And I gotta say that the board itself took some time, like years, coming to grips with exactly what the business plan was and how it was generated. So I think we finally got a very good handle on the way that it works. Every 3 years, the OPP put together a strategic plan. From that strategic plan, there's a discussion that goes on between the OPP detachment commander and the particular board to develop an action plan. That's the vernacular of the OPP. That action plan, once it goes through the consultation process, ends up being called the business plan. That's the business plan that the adequacy standards regulation is talking about. So you can understand with 3 competing terminologies why it was so difficult for people across the table to really figure out, what the other was talking about when they often were talking about very different animals. And the strategic plan so far has been delayed. So the introduction of the framework, the timing is very helpful in that we will be able to consolidate what we've done and have time between now and the beginning of the year. So we will start in January and we will look forward to having a clean, complete year where we're actually implementing a board governance framework which is compliant with the legislation. So the business policy requires consultation not only between the board and town council, but the public, business owners, school boards, and how to do that consultation with recognizing the limited resources that the board and the town has required a bit of thought. I think we've come up with an excellent strategy to do that and comply with the legislation. It's obviously not meeting with every individual in the town or meeting with them, regularly, but we've got the policy geared so that we will be able to consult with everybody we need to consult with, get their input, and be able to meet our deadlines. So next slide. So part of the business planning policy also requires the board to do certain things, consulting with town council, and delivering certain information to the public in a timely way. One of those things is the annual report of the detachment commander. So that's a requirement of section 31 of the board. So it's got to, it contains things like performance objectives and indicators, public complaints, the actual cost of police services, and other crime information. And so the board, when the board gets that report from the detachment commander, the board in turn has to provide it to town council by a deadline, and also has to provide it to the public, post it publicly by a deadline. And the legislation or the regulation says you've got to have those deadlines in your policies. So we've got a bit of redundancy built into the policies. Those deadlines occur in a number of policies. They're in the business planning, they're in the annual reporting, but most importantly, the adequacy standards regulation. And this is perhaps the most important policy that the town council has to look at, is the protocol for information sharing. So if you can just turn the page. Next. Yeah, so this is a document that actually has to be, the way we've set it up, it gets reviewed by council and then signed by the board as well as council. And it sets out what information needs to be shared, the timing of sharing that information, and all in compliance with the policies. The interesting thing that, and we've highlighted it, and I've actually asked the deputy mayor to socialize this issue a bit with council members. The adequacy standards regulations, and you heard this from me before, are not finely calibrated provisions. They are, in many cases, poorly worded, and this is one of them. There's a provision in 32(1)D which requires not only consultation with town council, but also if town council chooses, the joint determination of the business plan with town council. Now, I interpret that as being two separate things. If words are used in different ways, they have to have different meanings. So not only does town council have to consult with the board in connection with the business plan, but they're being invited to say, we want a joint decision-making process on that final version. The board has assumed, and the recommendation that we'd make to council is that you don't do that, that you take your consultation role and we will consult with you on it, but that the final decision with respect to the business plan should be left with the board. But that is council's decision, and for you to make, I'm happy to answer questions about that and help you out with that decision. But we've talked about it at the board, and that's not necessarily tonight, but that's a decision for council.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Mr. McSweeney, I think that is probably the most important point of the presentation, right? And if I was just to listen to what you're saying, the first thing I would want to understand is why are you telling us this now? And the whole piece is, this is a new business, right? So it's a new cycle in terms of the way that we're approaching it, and we're getting down to how this is going to run. So the first time we were given this policy, it was actually written for us before we were actually part of the OPP. This time we sort of muddled through, came to be part of that business planning process, and now the policies and procedures have been written so that council and the public and whatnot will be part of the next one. And that's the whole point of this presentation, to say that this board, this group of people will be included, and those people will be included as we go. But we haven't been able to do that because it's a new process. But it was occurring to me as you're speaking, like, well, why haven't we done this?
Yeah.
Well, it's new.
Yeah, and I would venture to say outside the major urban areas, nobody has done it. From all of the information that I've been able to glean, talking to other boards, talking at the OAPSB annual general meeting, and going to the workshops and watching people put up their hands when they're asked if they have policies, and they don't. And my comment is, well, anyone that didn't put up their hand, you're not in compliance with the legislation, and they freak out. You know, there's just not a huge level of knowledge about what exactly a police services board is supposed to do, you know, month to month, to have completed in compliance with the legislation all of the things that have to be done in order to comply. And, you know, it's nobody's fault, but, and you know, we're right there. Like, I think we're probably better than most, but, you know, for a variety of reasons, you know, we've been focusing on other things perhaps during the transition from Section 31 to Section 10, but, you know, it's not about blame. And I know you're not saying this, Todd, but it's about coming to terms with what the tools you need to have in order to properly govern a public trust, which is exactly what it is. And so maybe I'll just skip to slide 9 because this is the other part of the presentation I just wanted to drive home. Next steps. So I'm in your hands on how we do this, and maybe it's an offline discussion to come back and report to the public how we've handled it. But the council has to read at least those two policies, the business planning policy and the framework for annual reporting, and well, there's 3, and the protocol for information sharing. Those are the most important things. You have to read them, you have to be comfortable with them, and we have to have some sort of dialogue about how this consultation process is going to work. And the little determination, the joint determination issue, you have to make that decision because it has to be written into the policies, and then we have to base how we proceed based on that premise. So, you know, I think the board will meet with council. I don't know whether you deputize a working group or whether we come back and you know, it's a little bit cumbersome doing it in a meeting like this because the dialogue has to be made. So I leave that for you to think about. The board is going to be looking at passing this on September 19th. And I say that not to jam you, because we will pass it. And if all the decisions that need to be made by council haven't been made, when they are made, we'll just revise what we've done and accommodate them. So there are, the other thing I want to just say is there are police services boards. I get calls all the time. I just got a call a couple of days ago from Brant County that are very concerned about their governance. They go on our website and they see and sort of kudos to us. They go on our website, they see our public minutes, and they say, well, we're not doing any of that. Like, we don't do anything. All we do is meet, and nobody does any thinking. Nobody does any planning. Nobody does anything. And we don't even know how to get at what we should be doing, because we have no template. The legislation is impenetrable. And I hear that all the time. And so we've been talking about this for a long time. As soon as we're done, we're going to roll all this stuff out through the OAPSB. I've had a couple of meetings with Ryan Teschner, who's the Inspector General of Policing for Ontario, relatively new to the job. Spent a lot of time with the Toronto Police Services Board. Dwayne Sprague, the ministry official who's tied to our board, and Lisa Darling at the OAPSB. They're all interested in having a template. They're all interested in rolling something out that these boards, largely in non-urban areas, can look at and try to adapt for their own uses. So we're going to roll it out. Like, that's another really key thing that we want to do. And the last thing I'll say is you'll see that in the policies, two very important policies that we've imposed on ourselves to provide some discipline in what we do. We have service standards. We have a meeting service standards, which allow us to, ahead of time, to do all of the things we need to do to prepare for a meeting, and then do all the things we need to do after a meeting, like file minutes with the town. And there's quite a number of things. But we have a huge framework now, a governance framework, 20 policies. We started asking ourselves, well, how are we going to make sure that we do everything we need to do that's covered by these 20 policies month by month, and come out when we need to within the month and by the end of the year with the comfort that we've complied. So we've got the policy D3T is a general service standard policy, which goes through in detail what we have to do. And there's a calendar attached to it that will say when we have to do it. And then Mayor Post made a brilliant suggestion at our last meeting, which we're going to adopt. We'll attach a work plan to that. And so that, and it's absolutely essential, because otherwise it's all just paper that it's like a government report that gets shelved, right? It's completely useless unless you have a tool to open it up and implement it.
Thank you, Mr. McSweeney. My suggestion would be that perhaps you and the deputy mayor and our CAO, Mr. Smith, and maybe a member of clerk's team schedule a meeting to review some of that, and then put together the policies and a recommendation for council to proceed. I think that would probably be an appropriate way to move forward some of this approval, because you're right, it's a bit cumbersome to do in a meeting like this. So was there questions? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And Mr. McSweeney, thank you very much for all of the detail and your leadership in this. And I've commented this to the Deputy Mayor. We are fortunate to have you in the police board because
thank you.
of your expertise. 2 points, one of which is, of course, identifying your connection as you've identified it. You consulted with, I would assume it would have been the Solicitor General's ministry, correct?
It was yes.
Yeah.
Dwayne Sprague is our representative from the ministry, and they were interested, but lightly interested.
I was wondering about that. I was going to ask, how was your consultation or discussion? And you've indicated here that there were no objections to what was being.
And similarly with the OPP. I mean, and you can imagine, we presented the concept, and I think I even gave the cover memo to the former detachment commander, and just wanting some input from the OPP, because there are questions. And what we heard back was, not unexpectedly both times, because we tried twice, was, the OPP, that's fine. You do what you need to do to govern yourself as a board, but the OPP will focus on compliance with the PSA and the adequacy standards regulations. Those are the documents we are going to pick up in order to govern what we do, and that's fair. It's not a full answer because of the ambiguities within the legislation. And one final thing, I'll just say, all of this is all about just getting into compliance with the current rules.
Mhm.
Come next spring, and I've heard it's as early as April. I just heard that a couple of days ago. It used to be July or August, but come April, the new legislation is going to come into place, into force, as the new regulations will come into force. And there's going to be a window after that that boards are given to bring themselves into compliance. If you're not compliant now with the existing regime, and this is what people are freaking out a bit about, how can you become compliant with the new regime? If you become compliant now with a framework like this, it makes the task a lot easier.
The PSB right now is in a good spot, at least ours.
We're in, I don't know, I mean, outside Toronto. I mean, Toronto does its own thing, but outside Toronto and some of the bigger cities, there's nobody that is in as good a spot as we are.
And I do have a second question, and you talked about communication, and I know that we're privileged to your board minutes as they stand right now. Will there be any change with those board minutes moving forward?
Well, we've talked about this for a couple of months now within the board. I think the focus is on pushing things from in-camera to public. So yes, our public meetings, our public agendas are going to contain much more material than they used to. We're going to push as much as we can out to enhance transparency. One of our transparency policies that I mentioned actually has a section devoted to the board thinking about what we put on our website. And I think all of this stuff is going to go on the website. All of our framework, all of the policies, all of the bylaws. If you look at what other boards are doing within the province, there's a wide range of compliance from nothing to almost everything. And I think we want to veer over to the almost everything side of that range.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. McSweeney. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. I want to thank you for the probably tireless number of hours that you've put into this policy. I know you've been working on it for a considerable length of time. When I reflect back on Appendix A and I see all the different policies, can you direct me on where the policy is for the criteria for in-camera meetings? I watch the meetings, and some of the things I just see the title of what it's in camera, and I question what eligibility or criteria and what are you using to base what's going in camera or not. And I do have a secondary question, but I'm really wanting to know where in your policy list here does the in-camera quality.
It's in our general bylaw, number one, a combination of that and the regulations.
So is the criteria set by the province or by the board?
I think we might have mirrored the language in the bylaw that is in the regulations. I'd have to check and get back to you, but I know that the definition of what constitutes in-camera confidential is set out.
I wonder if they follow the same criteria as our in-camera rules, like if you're identifying an individual, but like I said, when I see the subject title of some of the in-cameras, it doesn't seem to have an identifiable person. So, I'll leave that with your governance.
Councillor Sherwood, I can answer that quickly.
Yeah.
The Police Services Board is not governed under the Municipal Act, so our in-camera regulations come directly from the provincial Municipal Act legislation. The Police Services Board doesn't. So what's constituted confidential to the Police Services Board can be very different. It doesn't have to have anything to do with an identifiable individual. It can be anything that's happening within the Police Services Board that's not for public consumption, because there is a lot of confidential investigations that are going on. So it's not necessarily about a person, but there is criteria that we follow. It's just not the same as what we follow for council.
Okay.
And just to add to that, I think that what we've tried to do is when we do have an in-camera discussion about something that we don't feel is appropriate to discuss in public, whether it's because we haven't fully, got our own direction in gear. We do report on that in public.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Sherwood?
I do. One more.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. In your presentation, and the screen's gone now, but I was just quickly trying to find it. You're asking for us to give permission for the board to make the final decision, and we overall are the governing board of the Police Service Board. So I'm not in support of that. I think that we do need to be fully part of that whole consultation. That's just my individual.
Yeah, to be clear, it's a two-parter, and the regulation adds that second part. So you definitely are part of the consultation, but the wording in the board in the regulations is, and where the board so chooses, there will be a joint determination process, and it's not joint determination is not defined anywhere. I've asked the question up to the ministry to see what the interpretation of that is. Haven't really received an answer. So my interpretation of it is it's something different from consultation. It's actually a joint decision making if council chooses. So it's your choice. It's something you have to talk about. It's your choice. I think the board has talked about it and recommends that you don't go that route, but it's your choice.
Okay. Was there any additional questions or comments for Mr. McSweeney? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Just to pick up on that point, I think what we're trying to do as we become more knowledgeable and understanding how things work with the OPP is to ensure that we're tied to this board, right? And that connectivity. And so that's why this is the second time Mr. McSweeney's been here. He'll be back again. What are we committed to? I'm sorry, Ian, is it every 6 months we're coming, or was it more? But it's prior to recently, we weren't here.
I would say it'd be probably more than twice a year, 2 or 3 times a year. In addition to, and Councillor Sherman, she made a great point that the first time I was here, that I think we've built into the policies and following up with respect to crime statistics. When we get them, council gets them.
Thank you, Mr. McSweeney. Any additional questions? Okay, thank you very much for being here. We'll see you back.
Next time I'm here, I'll maybe be 4 minutes.
Yeah. You banked some time. Okay, next up we have John Noss and Abdel Al Sharif from Blackline Consulting, who are joining us virtually. Mr. Noss, Mr. Al Sharif, the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen and presentation that we've put together. Hopefully everyone can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. So today, a few things on the agenda, but in terms of objective, really, this is to provide a bit of an update on the organizational review that Blackline is conducting with the town. In terms of our agenda today, we'll go through a bit of context about what the intent of the review. We'll take you through progress to date, some of our initial observations, our next steps, and leave some time for yourself to ask us some questions. So just in terms of context for yourselves and a bit of reminder, the intent about this review is really to make sure that the town's organizational design and staffing is fit for purpose for our future growth and to manage that. What does that mean? That kind of breaks down into 3 key areas that you're looking for from this review, which is 1, evaluating the services that the town provides and the service levels that it is meant to deliver on. Assessing the level of suitability and sustainability of the town's staffing to meet those service levels and deliver those services, and then also the structure that you have. So again, it's not just the kind of the number of staffing, but also the organizational structure. And lastly, developing recommendations on how to make sure that it is suitable for the growth that you're seeing. As well as looking at ways for greater efficiencies. In terms of our approach, it's by design collaborative to really get a good sense of the organization. As we started the engagements with the senior leadership of the town, one of the things that became quite evident was a desire to be much more kind of engaged with staff. We've extended some of the staff interviews and workshops. So that's why our discovery phase, you can see, is a bit longer. Also, it happened over the summertime, which can be a bit more problematic. But we've been able to engage at all levels of the town, from yourselves, from the council members meeting yourselves, all the way down to staff. We've been on site a number of times to meet with staff, see what they do, how they do things, so what we call kind of ride-alongs, and see how they operate things, as well as interviews, either one-on-one and group. And we also did a staff survey. So quite a long kind of time that it's taken, but I think it was really important to make sure we've got all the right levels of input. We're slightly behind in terms of our original plan because of that, but one of the things that we are keen, and we knew kind of from the beginning, was making sure that if there is anything that should be recommended and put in for budget 2024, that you're able to get that information. So we are going to be working with the senior management team to make sure that you do get that information kind of early on. So we're not going to wait until the final report to share that list of opportunities and recommendations, especially if it's something a little bit more urgent. But overall, I think the key thing for us is, when we do organizational reviews, one, you want to make sure we've got a good level of collaboration, good communication with staff, and making sure we address their concerns and their questions. And one of the things that we are doing, I think a slight change from our original plan, was having town halls with staff at the beginning, middle, and end, so that they can see kind of the progression of things. Also, one of the things I'll talk about a little bit about later on is, as we get through our analysis into the insight phase, we've got what we call co-design sessions, and effectively what they're opportunity sessions where we bring staff together. We do a bit of show and tell, hear what we think are some of the opportunities, but we also want their input on, maybe why some of those opportunities might be a bit more difficult, but also, do they have some ideas that they think would be helpful? When we perform these reviews, one of the things that we like to start from kind of a context setting perspective is looking at your operating expense overall. And the graph to the right-hand side, all of those gray dots are a municipality in Ontario. So we've got it all mapped out. And you can see where you are in terms of operating expense per household. So you're kind of right in the middle there. But in terms of the operating expense itself per household, you're on the kind of the higher end, not too far off from the median, but definitely a little bit higher. Why we do this? One, it gives us a bit of kind of overall kind of macro view of where you are as a town in terms of operating expense, because it's really helpful to understand, as the city grows and as it kind of changes, what does that mean potentially for the operating expense? So for us, it's more about making sure we've got good context for what it looks like today and where it might go over a period of time. As we dig a bit deeper into it, one of the things that we then start to look at, because this is very much focused around the organizational structure and staffing, is what we call workforce expense. And workforce expense, we look at two things: your salary and benefits, and wages, and contracted services. What we're able to do is take that, and we're able to use that as a bit of a proxy to understand where you are in terms of the adequacy of your workforce today in terms of total workforce. So if you can imagine other municipalities, while you may do it internally, they may do it externally with either a third party or as a shared services, and vice versa. The data that we're able to use here is what's reported to the province, and every municipality has to report on it. It's very standardized reporting. It's the FIRs, or the financial information reporting, that occurs every year. They have certain categories, and as you can see on the graph, across the top, there's environmental, what they call general government, planning, recreation, and transportation. Now, I'll explain the graph a little bit and then what it means. The red line is Orangeville. And then the gray is where you can see, again, all the municipalities in Ontario, where they land. We're able to kind of normalize that and look at it from a kind of expense category to see which ones are a little bit higher in those areas and which ones are lower. And then we're able to map them over a period of years. So we've got from effectively 2010 through to 2022. So that's why you can see it's a line. And what you can see on the total side there, that you were a little bit above, and then you're into the kind of middle area of the gray. And again, now you're kind of peaking above the middle area again. As that breaks down, it looks slightly different across the different cost categories. So that's where we're able to kind of look at and say, well, there might be certain areas of the services that you're providing and the departments, the workforce is a little bit above or below or in line. This really helps us to get, again, a bit more of a picture around where is it that we maybe need to spend a bit more time and delve in a little bit more deeper, where you're above and maybe where you're a little bit below and where you're in line. But as you can see, some of the areas you are a little bit above. And for me, again, this helps us to kind of focus our efforts around why are you a little bit above or why are you a little bit below, and what's driving that? What can we do to maybe bring you more in line with your peers? From an initial set of observations, and I'm sure you've got some questions around some of those expenses, but right now we're still doing that detailed analysis. So I can't tell you categorically as to why maybe general government expense is a little bit higher, but we do have some, I think, indications on why. And there's a couple of things that we want to highlight here based on our analysis to date. Is one about resident expectations, and then they have increased over the pandemic. This isn't uncommon compared to other municipalities that we've worked with over the past few years. What we are noticing is that with the services, the speed to respond is one aspect. The other is volume. Just the sheer volume, and planning is a good example where there's been a significant volume increase over the time. And what does that mean? I think in terms of resident expectations, we need to make sure that, one, we're able to understand what's driving those expectations. And what's the work volume? How are we positioned today in terms of staffing, but not just staffing, but all the other things behind it to make sure that staff have what they need to be efficient and effective in their delivery. The second one that has been quite interesting is processes are highly manual and paper-based. So even though you do have several systems in place for the different departments and divisions, in terms of how they're set up, how they're able to support staff, may not be as effective as it can be. And again, that's where we're then potentially seeing some inefficiencies. And we do think that this is going to be probably an area that's going to require a bit more focus, which is making sure that staff have the right tools, the right systems, the right data, they've got the right training and capability, and the systems are set up and configured in the right way so that it is as efficient as possible. In terms of the town's overall structure, looks from kind of the top level down as we look at it, looks fairly well structured in terms of the reporting structure and the changes that have made from the previous structure. That's been a positive one. We look at it from several different perspectives, from layers and spans, and so far it's looking fairly decent. Again, feedback then also more of the qualitative aspect was also feedback around how well is it working, and it has been quite positive. Lastly, one of the things that we are seeing, and again, it dovetails slightly with, I think, some of the technology elements and challenges with technology at the town in terms of systems and data, is there's very few measures that are being used to manage the performance of service expectations and how well you're performing. So, you can imagine if you've got a stack of paper and you're trying to get some measures out of it, that's either going to take staff some time to crunch the numbers, put it together in a report, and then, put it together and then do some analysis around it. If you've got that automated, if you've got the right systems, it's actually a click of a button where you're able to then spend less time around entering the information in and actually spending more time on the analysis and what it means. So it's definitely, I think, one of the things that in terms of where you want to be, it'll be a bit more around making sure that we do have all those enabling kind of foundation things around, the processes, the systems, the data, to then be able to set measures and then measure against them. One of the things that we have been looking at as well, there was a survey, an employee survey that was done in 2022. We did one as part of our review. It wasn't a like for like in terms of the actual questions, but there were certain themes that we were able to cover off that were quite similar in terms of accountability, communication, and what we call kind of relationship management. And there's some positive things that have come out of that. And again, while the numbers on the graph are showing downward, it's downward against some of the serious concerns or issues that were raised in the previous survey. So this is a positive message overall. Staff's top concerns They remain consistent, but it's heading in the right direction. You know, the numbers are moving down, which means that they've got less concerns about some of the areas around accountability, communications, and relationship management. So again, a bit of a positive message around some of the things that we are seeing with the changes that have been occurring in the last 6 to 12 months. So next, what we'll be working on, again, the team's in the midst of doing a lot more of the detailed analysis, getting into understanding a little bit more around why maybe those workforce expenses are a little bit higher, what's driving those things, and then what can we do about it. We'll be drafting a report which summarizes our analysis. We'll also be developing a list of opportunities based on our analysis to then say, here are the things that Blackline thinks would be improvements to help you both, you know, set for future growth, but then also make sure you're efficient at managing that growth. And we'll be setting up some what we call the co-design sessions, which will be staff and management together, reviewing our opportunities, but also providing their own so that we can then take that away and develop a final set of recommendations. Our next presentation to the council will be that final report, and we'll provide that detailed analysis as well as the opportunities and the top recommendations that we think that you should move forward with. And again, just to give you a bit more perspective, what does that final report look like? What will be included in it? One, actionable recommendation, so things that, you know, we think the town should go forward with, step-by-step kind of implementation steps on, you know, how to then move it forward. So it's not just here are the things you need to do, but also how you go about doing it. It will also cover off recommended key performance indicators or measures that the town should adopt to be able to provide that information around how the town is performing. We will be looking at what we call alternative delivery options the town could explore, whether that's sharing services with other municipalities or using third parties. We'll also be putting together a 5-year staffing plan, as well as a process for management to review that staffing plan on a regular basis so they can enhance it, improve it, and make sure it's fit for purpose as things change. And lastly, a prioritized set of recommendations around improving efficiencies at the town. I'll stop there and answer any questions you might have for me.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Naas, thank you for your presentation. Again, I've used this term or phrase before. There's a lot to digest, and whenever you have detailed information like this, it certainly provides not to say red flags and or some validation of great things that are happening. We have great things happening here within our community. We have great things happening at this municipality. Page 6 kind of jumped out at me, and the reason why I'm just bringing this up, I need some clarification because again, whenever I look at a grid like this and comparators, to attract great staff, you have to end up having obviously compensation and other elements to bring them to your municipality. This is again part of the the work world that we're in. Other municipalities are attracting talented people, and we're fortunate to have talented people here amongst ourselves. But when I ended up reading that little section in the bottom, it said workforce expenses are salaries, wages, and benefits, and contracted services. Orangeville is in the red line in comparison to the other municipalities. I saw some parts of the graph that seem to be a little bit higher. Is this again, diving into like-minded or similar-sized municipalities? That would be a true comparator to me, as opposed to the 443 other municipalities that are a part of this, because other municipalities are larger, smaller, but were part of the assembly of this information. Was it truly making comparisons to other municipalities of the same size?
We've looked at the graphs for lower tier, and it's almost identical. To be honest, in some cases, you actually look worse off. So I think when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, either way, it is showing again directional where you are. But yeah, we've looked at it both ways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Was there any additional questions from members of council? Seeing none, I just want to thank you both for your report. We look forward to seeing you back here in a few more weeks with some final results. I'm assuming middle of October-ish. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Have a good night. Next up, we have Mr. Rick Ugolini. You can go ahead and take the floor. If you can just turn on the mic and state your name and address for the record, and it is over to you.
Rick Ugolini, is the mic on? 19 Cedar Drive. First thing I would like to mention is I'd like to thank Mr. Koselak for taking care of those dead trees in the park in Rotary Park. Thank you. There was an eyesore and they're very dangerous. Thanks again, and thanks staff. I'm here to talk about 12-3. I made up a little bit of a speech here, but I don't think it really matters anymore from what I understand. But you know what? I did it, and I should present it. Just because you can does not do something doesn't mean you should. It's a slap in the face to the soldiers who fought for the freedoms we enjoy today. Bit by bit, our freedoms are being taken away from us. This is a sad day in Orangeville's history when we have to ask permission to speak and question. What happened to the rights of freedom of speech that our soldiers fought and died for? And that's about it. I'm a little bit passionate about this. I have a niece that's in the Navy and a grandson that's just going into the armed forces. And, you know, they fight for this country. And I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people in this room that have had family members in the armed forces at one time or another. I didn't serve. I had a grandfather that served and a father-in-law that served. He was there at D-Day. And I'm just a little bit annoyed, well, actually a lot, that they're out there protecting us and keeping our rights when our rights are being trampled on right here. And that I don't understand, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ugolini. Mr. Ramsey, we've got you up next. Was there any questions, first of all, for Mr. Ugolini? No, seeing none. Okay, Mr. Ramsey, you're up next. The mic's already on. The floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Noel Ramsey. I live on 15 Feed Street in Orangeville. This evening, I'm here to oppose an element of the item referred to as 12.3 that's on this meeting's agenda. For members of the public, I'm identifying the section 12 that contains staff reports, and I'll restate what agenda 12.3 contains. Staff recommends that report CPS 2023-49 procedure bylaw amendments be received and that council pass a bylaw to amend previous bylaw 064/2017, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and its committees, including amendments to quorum requirements for committees, consent agenda, and most importantly, removal of question period, the replacement of new business as outlined in report CPS 2023-049. The issue I'm identifying this evening with this report is on page 3, where it addresses the removal of question period in council meetings, such as the one we're currently attending. In that report, it states question period is listed as a standing item on council agenda and is intended for members of the public to ask questions to council and in turn staff. Staff recommends that the procedure bylaw be amended to delete section 7.8, which removes question period. The reasons given for that is the question period, they state, is the question period allows for person to ask council and or staff questions on any matter, which is problematic, as no prior notice is given to the public, which I have an issue with, which no prior notice is given to the public on any new item raised. And I highlighted this, and provides staff no ability to be prepared with accurate and complete information. They continue to state, in addition, there are more effective and timely opportunities for the public to engage with council and staff outside of council meetings, which include registering as a delegate with respect to any matter up to 1 week prior to a council meeting, registering as a delegate with respect to a matter listed on the agenda up to 10 a.m. on the morning of the meeting, or after 10 a.m. with council's permission. Now, I don't understand the next portion of the report where it actually lists. The staff report also lists the following ways you can ask questions. In council public meetings, which I would state that this is one. In public information center, which I don't know what that refers to. In a mayor's town hall, via email or phone or in-person discussion, or through social media. Governing by social media has grave concerns, but so as members of the council, it is of value for you to know what the community you represent really appreciates, as well as what concerns them. And even with all these methods to communicate with the town, staff, and council, we know that many citizens will grumble or complain about town issues in their day-to-day lives without bringing them forward. Some may mention a concern if they bump into someone from council or staff during a walk. Fewer pick up the phone or send a text message, and even fewer will compose an email. And a small number of people may even feel compelled to write a letter. Then you have those who believe it's worthwhile attending a council meeting either in person or via phone. You will have delegates who are prepared, confident enough to present to council and to town staff in front of the public. But now, when you invite people to speak, if they have a question, remember that it takes a certain amount of nerve, a certain amount of confidence to step forward to the microphone. Yes, it's possible they may ask a question where staff may not have an answer or a complete answer. There is nothing wrong in saying we'll look into that or get back to you later, or to just report back to council. Staff might feel embarrassed, but it's just as likely that the person asking the question feels the same way. They may feel they've asked a stupid question. In many cases, I've seen members of council answer these questions. It's important to also maintain question period near the end of the agenda. When councillors are debating a particular topic, it's possible to ask them to clarify a point they made. The significance here is that the answer or clarification is done in the same meeting with the same audience. I have personally done this myself on multiple occasions with regards to different budget meetings with both then Councillor Taylor, as well as when he was deputy mayor, as well as Councillor Sherwood, where the explanation with regards to elements on the budget weren't clearly explained by the finance. They added some clarification, but it was still, I thought, confusing to the public. And I asked for further clarification, which happened in that same meeting. And the public who was listening heard that same clarification, which was greatly appreciated from both councillor and deputy mayor. I have to stress there are people that these are people who feel that they need to be involved in municipal governance. They have taken time out to attend a council meeting. In many cases, they have a concern or would like to add something with regard to the current meeting. If you're serious about having insight into what the people are thinking, I would ask that you please don't remove this important avenue of communication. With regards to the current agenda, item 12.4 actually has an item which refers to bylaw and fines with regards to infractions. I have an issue not with the fines that you would set, but other issues around how the bylaws are enforced with the important part of keeping the community safe, which is stated in 12.4. If this is removed, I wouldn't have the opportunity to cover that in question period in the same meeting that element is discussed. Giving the public the right to review or ask questions of things that were just discussed or debated is an important factor in our democracy. In some cases, you're passing bylaws which require multiple readings. If something is just raised in a particular council meeting and it is passed, in question period, you can't raise a concern and have it reversed, but you can bring it to the immediate attention of those who were just discussing the pros and cons of passing that bylaw for future consideration when it comes back for the second and third reading. Again, I would ask you please to maintain the opportunity for the public to ask questions during question period. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Was there any questions for Mr. Ramsey at all? Okay, I will invite up Ms. Mustafa. Come on up. And if you can just have a seat, state your name and address, because we don't have you on the agenda, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Graciela Cárdenas Mustafa. I live on 27 Hewitt Street. Again, I'm here a second time around advocating for our democracy and free speech and rights as Canadians. You see, I came from a communist country, and I know what it's like, that slippery slope when we try to eliminate or we try to minimize our rights for the sake of convenience. Democracy is messy, and citizens, residents, and Canadians, we need to reach our public servants, and that's you. We need to have you close, and we need to be able to talk to you personally, not an email, not phone calls. As we know, our digital age now, it takes, you can send an email and they won't get back to you, in 24 hours, 72 hours, and then you'll still be waiting. On the phone, it's the same situation. You call and, somebody's busy, they don't answer. So the importance of continuing with public question period, I think it's essential in our democracy. And I was here once in 2020 advocating for our Constitution, and I was shut down by the previous mayor. And not only that, he went as far as to shut me down in the Dufferin Council as well. So I hope my experience is a learning lesson for all of us. It's really important to keep our freedom of speech alive, and even more, invite the public to participate. If you shut down public question period, nobody's going to want to come. And I just heard from a wonderful council member how nice it is to have people here. So if you do that, you will alienate more and more the citizens and yourselves. We will not be able to communicate. So I really appreciate you letting me speak. Thank you very much. I hope you will allow us to continue to have communication with you openly and transparent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Okay, that brings us to the end of delegations. At this point, I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess. We will be back at 8:40. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Before we move into the staff report section, I just want to do a quick introduction. You'll see someone sitting at the delegation table there, and I'm very pleased to introduce everybody to our new treasurer for the town of Orangeville, Patrick Kelly, who's joined us most recently from Wilmot and has a wealth of experience before Wilmot. So welcome to the town of Orangeville. I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. Just briefly through you, Mayor Post, it's a pleasure to join the team here in Orangeville. I've been here for all of 5 days officially as of today, but had the opportunity to meet some amazing members of the staff team. I know Councillor Andrews noted that the staff team here, and then everyone I've met has me inspired to come and join the team. Diving in head first into budget season is a great time to come on board, and I'm looking forward to working with each of you on council as we put together a budget for 2024. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here, Patrick. Okay, we will head right into staff reports. We're going to start with item 12.1, which is the community grants update. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-68 community grants update be received, and that council approve distribution of 2023 community grant budgeted funds to the Dufferin Film Festival for $500 from one-time grants, and that council approve distribution of 2023 community grant budgeted funds to the Terry Fox Foundation for $400 from a one-time grant. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Stevens, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Item 12.2 is the delegation of authority amendment. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-58 delegation of authority be received, and that council pass a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-75, the delegation of authority bylaw. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Questions or comments on this item? All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Item 12.3 is regards to the procedural bylaw amendment, which is report CPS 2023-49. I am not even going to read the recommendation on the report. I'm going to give council an opportunity to make comment first. I will turn it over to Councillor McIntosh first, then Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I've had a lot of time to think about this one. There were some good points and some bad points. I really like the consent agenda. I think that's a great idea. We'll speed things up, help staff get out earlier. As far as question period, I think we need to keep it. I really do. The next question is, where do we put it? I think, and I heard Mr. Ramsey suggest at the end, I think there's far more usefulness being at the front of the agenda, such as the county of Dufferin does. Other towns in Dufferin County, most of them do have it at the beginning of the agenda. That way, it gives council some thoughts, some information, some help with some of the things that are coming up. If we wait till the end of the agenda, things have already been decided, and it's too late then. So I listen to Mr. Ramsey, but I truly believe it should be at the beginning. Also, I think we need to keep better control. There's some speakers that get up and they're not asking questions. They're telling us things. They're trying to get council to slip up with different things, trying to get staff to slip up. I think we need to do a better job of cutting them off. I didn't realize myself, to be honest with you, there's a 3-minute limit on question period. We have a lot of speakers that get up there for 10, 12 minutes and just prattle on about what's on their mind, and I don't think that's a good idea. And I'm not referring to anyone in particular. So again, my 2 cents worth, I think we should keep it. I think it should be at the beginning of the agenda like the county has it. And that's all I have on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Councillor Sherwood?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I too will not be supporting the motion as in the report. I do not support the removing of question period. Question period is the order to preserve the free speech rights of our citizens. Question period is an essential part of local government meetings. I will be putting forward a further motion that question period remain and be moved to the beginning of the agenda. That way it gives staff some time. If a question is posed at the beginning of the agenda, staff some time to prepare and have the answer ready for when that report comes to discussion. So I will be asking for reconsideration of the motion that's in the report.
Okay, there's no motion on the floor yet, Councillor Sherwood, so we will get to that once everybody has an opportunity. Councillor Prendergast and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor Post, through you. I think it's crucial that we recognize that municipal government represents the most accessible tier of democracy, bringing governance closest to the people that it serves, or we serve essentially. These council meetings serve as a direct line of communication between citizens and elected representatives. In particular, question period plays a pivotal role in fostering transparency, accountability, and encouraging active public participation in government. It ensures that our local government remains accessible and responsive to the needs and concerns of the community. Through this question period, residents are afforded the opportunity to seek information from the council, provide valuable input on specific agenda items of that meeting. By maintaining this avenue of communication, we actively promote public engagement, ideally leading to a more engaged electorate. And I do believe that this should continue. We should keep question period open to residents. I think it would be beneficial to have it moved to the beginning of the meeting, and we should really set parameters. People should be speaking on agenda items for that meeting specifically, so that staff is prepared to speak on those issues. And that was one of the issues raised by staff. Our staff is impeccable and they like to be prepared. They like to do the research and give up-to-date information at council meetings. And they weren't able to do that with questions that weren't related to that specific agenda. Because believe me, they spend a lot of time preparing for these meetings. It's not fair to kind of just throw things from left field. So if we do continue, I would be delighted to see an impetus on having a question period related specifically to agenda items. If someone wants to speak to a different item, they're invited to delegate through that process. Just by preserving question period in our municipal council meetings, it's essential in upholding the principles of transparency, accountability, and public participation. And I really urge us to carefully consider the implications of its removal and to continue valuing this vital aspect of our democratic process. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and Councillor Pendergrass. Thank you. That is very, very well written and expressed. As for this particular staff report, I will say that everything except question period, I'm certainly in agreement with. I like the idea of the consent agenda for those of us who've been in other board governance environments. It expedites opportunity to have our new business renamed as, in fact, announcements, having the opportunity of defining quorum in a variety of ways, which includes the hybrid model, makes absolute sense. But removing question period removes the opportunity for the community to engage. It removes the opportunity for the community to express themselves. And I think that if we do so, it is going to be problematic. And I think the most important piece is that we do have a procedural process that needs to be followed in some capacity, not only from a municipality perspective, but also the general public. As we do with our delegations, there is a process for people to be prepared. And I do applaud Mr. Ramsey for his comment that sometimes people are not necessarily the most eloquent or are prepared professionally, but at least coming to council with a prepared question that in fact is written in such a way that makes sense and we can understand it, and also with the utmost respect of the individual that is delivering it, it's delivered properly. And I think that we also have to adhere to the timeline too as well. If there's 3 minutes to be allocated for this, that has to be adhered to. The last point is, in fact, the location or the timing of question period. I also agree with the idea of moving it up near the beginning of our council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Stevens, and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with all my colleagues. Question period should remain. It also should be closer to the top. Not quite in agreement with my two fellow colleagues from the east side there about if a person can ask a question that's not on the agenda for that night. I think question period should be that. It's a question from the community and they should be able to ask it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. A statement, and then I'll come back to the motion if I can. And so my statement would be I think question period is incredibly important. I think the linkage between the public and staff and those of us that are fortunate enough to sit on council, and by the way, we're fortunate enough to sit on council. It's an honor to sit here. It bothers me though, it's great to see a group of people out here tonight And the amount of emails that I get and phone calls I get, sometimes, to be honest with you, it's overwhelming, because you put yourself out in the public and people feel comfortable contacting you, and the questions that you get asked and the advocacy that it takes. But that's my obligation. That's my problem. I made that choice to sit here and to make sure that I get back to the public. But it's part of the job. And if you're not going to do it, you shouldn't sit here, right? So I think that we should be connected to the public. And I think obviously question period is important. So I did work with Mayor Post on what this should look like. And basically the way the amendment would come across is we would remove, the statement would stay the same except for the removal of question period. And then the add would be, and that staff report back on the best location per question period at a later meeting. And that would be the motion that I'd like to put.
Okay, so I'm going to read that motion, and then I've got some comments. So the motion then would be that report CPS 2023-49 procedural bylaw amendments be received, and that council pass a bylaw to amend bylaw 064-2017, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and its committees, including amendments to quorum requirements for committees, consent agenda, and replacement of new business as outlined in report CPS 2023-49, and that staff report back on question period for an appropriate location within the meeting agenda. Madam Clerk, does that work okay? Okay, perfect. Councillor Sherwood, and then I'll make my comment.
So I just have a comment there through you, Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor. I like your motion, except for the fact that I think we are able to provide the decision that it be put at the beginning of the agenda. I don't know why we need staff to report back. Why can't we go back to how it was before 2017 and place it there where it was before? I just don't understand the reasoning why we need staff to report back. I just say we have the authority to say that it shall be put at the beginning of the agenda.
We can change that motion to reflect that if that's what we want to do. Are you good with that? Yep, it's your motion.
I'm fine with either. To be honest with you, it was put there before because the people, change my wording. The history of this council hasn't always been a positive one. So it was put in a different spot to accommodate the public because they weren't being heard. And so that's why it was moved.
Yeah, I'll be speaking to that when I make my comments too.
Great.
Yeah.
And you'll be more articulate than me. Hold your anger.
Okay, so then to rephrase the motion, Deputy Mayor would read, as I've read, consent agenda and the replacement of the new business as outlined in report CPS 2023-49, and that question period remain but be moved to the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, okay, Deputy Mayor's good with that. Yeah, Madam Clerk.
Madam Mayor, just a point of clarification, if you could just confirm where on the agenda you would, council would particularly prefer it to be, before delegations, after delegations. I'm assuming around there.
On the county agenda, it is before delegations. Yeah. So that's where it is on the county's agenda. So I think that would make the most sense. It looks like I'm getting nods, so we're good. So can I get a seconder first, Councillor McIntosh? Now, I just want to make my couple of comments. So I want to first of all thank the clerk's team for the report and for doing a full environmental scan of other municipalities to better understand how we can create efficiencies in our council meetings. So I want to be clear, because I've heard some kind of different dialogue within emails that I've received and with some of the comments on social media, that the intent behind this report and this recommendations was not in any way to reduce democracy or transparency. These recommendations were made as a means to maximize the time that council has together to thoroughly debate and discuss critical issues. So it's important to remind the community that as a council, we're not allowed to discuss items that move forward town business when we're not in this setting. So the clerk's intent behind this report was to find ways to make sure that that dialogue is maximized in what we're doing. When we spend the time in front of you guys discussing in the decision-making process, that's a really important component. We are actually one of very few municipalities that actually have a public question period left. One of very, very few in the province of Ontario. But with that, I want to say that I'm really proud of the fact that we are one of the last municipalities that still has a question period. It is one tool that we have to make ourselves more accessible to the public and to our residents. And our council in particular has been very committed to creating more opportunities for dialogue with the public. You'll see we've added additional opportunities like the mayor's town halls is one example. And I would like to keep question period I'm happy to see that we're revisiting where it is on the agenda, because I just want to remind the community that the reason that it was moved in the first place, there are some of us at this table who've been attending council meetings for a very long time. And back during the 2014 to 2018 term of council, there was a very vocal group of residents, myself, Deputy Mayor being one of some of them, who attended all the council meetings and who held council to task and who made sure that the business of the municipality was moving forward in a fair and equitable way. And when we tried to voice our concerns at question period, we were quite often shut down. And as a result, there was a political decision that was made during, I believe it was 2017, according to when the bylaw was changed, to move council period to the end, or question period to the end of the council agendas, because they didn't want to hear what we had to say about the issues of the town at the beginning of the meeting. So it was moved in a way that really reduced democracy, and I would like to see it move back in a way that promotes extra democracy. So I'm really glad with the motion that's on the floor. I'm confident it's going to pass unanimously, and if there's no more further questions, I will call for a vote. Is everybody good? Okay, I will call for a vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And I want to thank everybody for being here today and for voicing your concerns. I think it's really important. It's an important part of what we do. So thank you. With that, we're going to move to 12.4, which is proposed increased set fines for parking and fire route bylaw housekeeping amendment. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-59 proposed increase to set fines for parking and fire route bylaw housekeeping amendment be received, and that council approve the recommended increases to set fines for parking in relation to the traffic bylaw 2005-78 and the fire route bylaw 2019-11 as amended, and that the current set fines for parking remain in effect until the proposed set fines have been approved by the Ontario Court of Justice, and that the council repeal Schedule M of the traffic bylaw number 2005-78 effective once set fine approval has been received, and that council amend fire route bylaw 2019-11 to remove the requirement that authorized signage for a designated fire route is to display the bylaw number. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Stevens, questions or comments on this item? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So my attitude on this, it's probably not very popular, but I think they should be as high as we possibly can. Right now, they are really not a deterrent whatsoever. Wouldn't care less if I got a small fine, and I'm sure some people sitting at home would think that's a very arrogant statement. It's just, it doesn't deter the action is what I'm getting at. So I'll certainly be in favor of this. And then the other piece to it is, and it's an old drum, and hopefully we can get to this over the next budget cycle, is I'd like to see more enforcement from our town. It certainly is annoying to have bylaws that I know are being infringed upon and we're not able to take action. So that's something that I'll be looking at as we go forward, and I just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Madam Clerk, can you speak to the fine prices and when they'll be coming back for revisit again?
Absolutely, through you, Your Worship. So suffice it to say that an increase in the set fines was long overdue, so we are trying to get at that now. As you will probably be able to tell in the comparator chart is that we took the average for most of our comparators, and that's where we set them for this initial increase. We're hoping to have more of a regular review with respect to what set fines are compared to our municipal counterparts, and bring them up as needed. The set fines are not going to be a part of the bylaw going forward, because that allows for a quicker administrative process with respect to increasing the fines that are more in line with our comparators.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to staff. In the attachment 1, can you direct me as to which one is the for the parking on the wrong side of the street, where the signage is currently for no parking on one side of the street? If they're parking on the side that has no parking, where does it fall in here? It's a $35.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood, that offense would be parking prohibited.
Parking prohibited?
Yes, that's what that would fall in.
Can I have a follow-up, Your Worship?
Yeah, of course.
So I see that this needs to be approved by the Ministry of Attorney General and the Ontario Court of Justice. We know how the court system works in a timely manner. any idea how long this is going to take? Like, will this term of council likely see this?
Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, the correct answer is it depends. But what we can say is that we have seen it come back in just a few short weeks. Sometimes it takes a couple more months, but we do expect it definitely within this term of council, and we're hoping before the winter parking enforcement season begins.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. 12.5 is towing services and vehicle storage yard facility bylaw update, CPS 2023-66. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-66 towing services and vehicle storage yard facility bylaw update be received, and that towing service and vehicle storage yard facility bylaw 2022-79 be amended to exempt applicants from the provisions of the bylaw if a provincial certificate issued under the Towing and Storage Safety and Enforcement Act, TSSEA, has been obtained and is provided to the satisfaction of the license issuer, and that towing service and vehicle storage yard facility bylaw 2022-79 be repealed effective December 31st, 2023. I would like to add on to that motion and that staff report back should there be changes to the MTO's timeline. Right now, it's anticipated that there are set timelines for this this new Enforcement Act to go into place, but if in any case those timelines aren't met, staff will report back and we'll keep the bylaw in place after December 31st if those timelines change. So that would be my addition to that motion that's in there. Deputy Mayor seconding it? Or moving it, sorry. Yeah, you'll move it. Can I get a seconder first and then I'll turn it over to you? Councillor Prendergast second it. Okay, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this piece, I just had to have a sidebar with our clerk at the break and make sure that we were on the same page. And really what's happening now is the legislation is ending as of the 31st. The town had no other recourse other than to have a bylaw put in because we didn't know what the province was doing. The bylaw ends on the 31st. The new tax, the new fee doesn't take place until July. Right, so there's a period of time, January to July, where there'll be no fees charged to the towing industry. And that is essentially the break that they're going to get here, as opposed to some sort of refund. They're going to get a break, correct? Right. So then moving forward, the province will hopefully take over with whatever they're going to do as of that date. Jan 1, but
Madam Clerk,
they'll have
go ahead.
free reign financially for 6 or 7 months, right?
Correct. Okay. Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Additional questions or comments? Councillor Sherwood?
So your worship, I'm going to direct back to staff, sorry, through you. So you know for a fact that the ministry will not be charging these tow people till July, because I had discussions with the delegation and they seem to allude that they will be paying the fees starting January 2024.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. All of the correspondence that we've received from the province indicates that there will be no fees charged to operators until July 1st of 2024. They will be required to be registered. Towing service operators and storage yards, they will be required to be registered with the province as of January 1, but they will not have to pay a fee until July 1.
Was there any additional questions or comments? Deputy Mayor?
If that, like, you just never know, right? Like, it sounds like that's the way it's going to go. If that's not the case, then I think we should just reserve the right to bring this back and have another discussion and look after our tow operators that are within.
And that's part of the reason why I added that on to the ending, was to make sure that it gives staff the openness to be able to bring it back to council should anything change with the timelines that have currently been provided by the province. Okay, perfect. Additional questions? We're all good? Okay, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. 12.6, municipal collaborations. The recommendation is that report CPS 2023-67, municipal collaboration uniform vehicle for hire bylaw be received, and that council pass a bylaw to authorize the entering into an execution of service agreements with each of the town of Grand Valley, town of Mono, and town of Shelburne for the purpose of providing licensing, administration, and bylaw enforcement services of a vehicle for hire bylaw. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Prendergast. Councillor Andrews got comment?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Very quickly to the clerk. When I looked at this, I think this is, again, a great opportunity to support our peripheral municipalities. Do we have enough bylaw staff to support this?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Your Worship, that's a great question. I will note that we are not really anticipating an uptick in work, if I can put it that way. Orangeville is the hub for vehicles for hire. So most of the licensees that we're expecting, we are already licensing them. We may get 1 or 2 more operators, maybe, but we're not really anticipating more than that. So I don't really foresee there being an additional need for staff, but that will be something that we will monitor.
Great. Thank you for the clarification.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We're moving on now to correspondence. The recommendation is that the following correspondence be received. 13.1 is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding the Builder Faster Fund. 13.2 is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding proposal to return lands in Ajax to the Greenbelt. 13.3 is the Town of Caledon notice of public open houses and statutory public meeting and request for comments regarding their official plan. 13.4 is from the Township of Melanchthon regarding changes to the MFI PPA. 13.5 is the Township of Melanchthon illegal land use enforcement update. 13.6 is from Brenda and Lino Chioma regarding the procedure bylaw amendment, and 13.7 from Peggy Bond regarding procedure bylaw amendment. Can I have a motion to receive? Councillor Andrews and Councillor Prendergast, questions or comments on any of the items? Councillor Andrews.
Yes, thank you very much. Very quickly, Your Worship, I do want to just again say thank you for your question at AMO to the then former Minister of Housing. I'm hoping that we might be able to, of course, follow up on that. I know that there's an opportunity and know through your leadership, we may have that chance to consider options for further housing development, but we'll look to your guidance on that. But I just was struck by, of course, that letter and, of course, now the new minister who signed off on it. So.
I will make sure the new minister knows my name as well. Don't you worry about that, and that they know where Orangeville is on the map. So I will be reaching out to the new minister as well, and to make sure that I'm sharing the same concerns with the new minister that I did with Minister Clark. Additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We're into committee and board minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the following meetings be received. We've got Sustainable Orangeville minutes from May 25th and from June 7th. Can I have a motion to receive those? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor Stevens. Questions or comments on any of the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We have no notices of motion prior to today's meeting. Is there any notices of motion at today's meeting? Seeing none. I will turn into new business. Who's got some new business for me? Nobody's got new business? That's very strange. Councillor Prendergast, go for it.
It's a bit in the future through you, Mayor. On October 14th, so save the date, everyone. Sustainable Orangeville and the CVC will be doing a tree plant. Location to be determined, but if you would like to come out in the morning on October 14th, it's going to be a beautiful Saturday, I'm sure. You are welcome to come plant some trees and grow our canopy.
Thank you, Councillor Prendergast. I have 2 items for new business. The first one is that the International Plowing Match is coming to Dufferin County for the first time in history. It will be taking place in Bowling Green, Amaranth, which is at Side Road 10 and 8th line. 8th line, yeah, 8th and 10th Side Road. It's quite impressive to see how they've set up Tent City so far. The International Plowing Match is running from the 19th of September through to the 23rd. Opening day is the 19th. Ahead of the 19th, though, there is a couple of other events that they're going to be hosting, such as the Campfire Poets on the Saturday before, which is the 16th. There are tickets available if you go to the International Plowing Match's website for each of the day's events. It's got a full outline. There's things like rodeos, and local entertainment is going to be there almost every day, as well as, of course, the the plowing. It's a big deal. They're expecting 70 to 90,000 people in Dufferin County. So they're expecting to double our population over 5 days, which is pretty incredible. And then the other one is just for everybody to save the date. The next town hall forum, the mayor's town hall, is going to be on the 26th of this month, starting at 6:30 over at Tony Rose. Most of the items that we're going to talk about are going to be very prevalent to seniors. We're going to talk about recreation and libraries and some of the programs that are available for seniors. But as always, there will be an open question period where you can ask any questions about anything that's on your mind to any of the town staff that's there. So please save the date and watch social media for updates. And I think that's it from me. Is there any other items of new business from anybody? Okay, then we will turn it over to public question period. Any member of the public connecting via telephone? Mona? None? Okay, so question period, anyone in the gallery? Okay, I see James and I see Noel Ramsey. Whoever's up first, you can rock, paper, scissors it, hop on up to the front, turn on your mic.
A couple of points. Thank you first for preserving question period. Secondly, on that particular point of the question period being at the beginning or the end, I'm very in favor of it being at the beginning. The only time I think of it being of real value is during budget time when you have multiple budget meetings. The reason being is that the budget is so complex that it's very hard for a citizen to go through all the lines and try and figure out, because the lines aren't self-explanatory. And you hear a lot of discussion amongst the council as to those items. And that's when you could come up with questions. So if there's an opportunity to have questions being asked at the end of just budget meetings, I would appreciate that. If not, then we'll just go with the beginning. To a question that actually came to me when I was reading the minutes and was triggered by a discussion in this meeting, with regard to fines for parking and bylaw enforcement. And what came to me in this meeting, I actually could have dealt with it with an email, sending it on, but while it's fresh in my mind and in your memory and what you personally heard just a few minutes ago, a few years ago, I started championing the cause of safety around the schools. And with regards to not only parking, but double parking side by side, not in a no parking zone, but in no stopping zones, where you've got cars parking on opposite sides of the road in front of the school in a no stopping zone on both sides. Buses can't get through, they're blowing their horns. And little children from a primary school with their parents are walking on that same road between those three vehicles, the bus and those two parked cars, with no sidewalks at that point. It couldn't have been a worse set of circumstances. So I had to bring this forward, and I've been pushing and pushing, and I've been dealing with bylaw enforcement, and I've seen them come out countless times, and I see them giving warnings. I know they're not issuing tickets. I know they're not issuing tickets. There's multiple warnings. I have been there personally, standing beside the cars when the residents are harassing the bylaw enforcement. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. They've actually had two bylaw enforcement officers present, and the citizens just ripping them a new one and being, abusive. I can appreciate that it's a difficult job. A year ago in December, I suggested that I asked the council if there was a possibility we could partner with the OPP to back them up or take over the enforcement of those types of situations, because they are kind of at risk. It is a hostile environment. The OPP are better equipped to confront citizens that are getting ignorant in your face and that. And the decision back then was to stick with just bylaw enforcing. Now, what triggered my thought, well, I may be wrong. I see Todd shaking his head, but I haven't seen the OPP doing any enforcement, just bylaw enforcement. And I have been calling them quite a few times. I've been putting in click fixes and whatever you call it with no updates. But if the police are present, they're less likely to harass the enforcement, the processing enforcement. And, it's all with the concern of the children's safety in mind. And nothing is being done. In this meeting, what triggered my thought process was I heard someone ask, do we have enough bylaw enforcement officers? I don't think we do. even if we do have enough enforcement officers, they're not enforcing the bylaw. Or we don't have enough enforcement officers to enforce the bylaws. Or we could partner with the OPS, but it's not happening. I would ask you to, my question is, could we investigate an improvement in the model, whether it be partner with the OPS or OPP, sorry, slip of the tongue, partner with the OPP, or come up with some other mechanism to back up those officers that are getting, harassed.
I can tell you, Mr. Ramsey, that as part of the Back to School Blitz, our bylaw team did partner with OPP to do a blitz of the town through drop-off, pick-up, lunchtime, those peak times with the school. And within the first 2 days of school being back, so Tuesday and Wednesday, our bylaw team handed out almost 200 tickets just around school zones, just those parking pieces. So they are listening. They are trying to get it done. They have to be there to see it. And I know that there was some warnings that were given initially through last year, but this year they're kind of taking a no nonsense approach to it.
This year in front of ODSS, I have seen bylaw enforcement officers go out, 3 or 4 cars illegally parked and no stopping. They're giving the warnings, they're pulling away, and within 200 feet of that officer pulling away and the car, the other cars behind them do a U-turn and park exactly where they were. The officer could have seen it in his rearview mirror.
No, that's fair. And our bylaw team's here today and taking those comments. So I appreciate that. Yeah, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Ramsey. It's a very complex, frustrating issue. So I'll stand beside you shoulder to shoulder and say, I see the problem too. The problem is the problem isn't just where you are, right? So I hear about Island Lake. I drive by Island Lake. My gosh, you think ODSS is difficult. And I'm not diminishing any school. We're not going to rank them, but there's numerous, Spencer, Princess Elizabeth, the list goes on. When we talk to the OPP, they are willing. They want to serve the community. They want to be there. They can only go if they have officers available. So in other words, if there's something else going on, and God forbid what that would be, they're going to be at that because that is probably of more significance. There's something else going on that's, of danger, of importance that they need to be at. But they promised that they will help our bylaw. And to your points about bylaw, that is an incredibly difficult job. You're absolutely right. They get abused. People aren't nice to them as they go, but I'm not sure if we've got enough bylaw either. But then it'll come right back to, and you and I are going to have a discussion at budget time. Well, where's all this money coming from? So it's an incredibly delicate balancing act that's very frustrating for all of us, right? But I hear you. I'd like to see our bylaws enforced with more. I'd like to give our bylaw officers more rigor and more support and make sure that they're following through and, feeling like we've got their back and that they're supporting these bylaws that we've got in place. But I don't know, we don't have it quite. We're not all the way to bright for sure.
With all the safety issues going on around all these schools that you're referring to, it's so important to issue the warnings and issue the fines. They will stop their behavior if they have to pay. And I don't care if it's $10 or $50. People get upset when they have to pay a fine. They will change their behavior. If you're not penalizing them like that, nothing will change.
Madam Clerk has a comment for you too, Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Ramsey and I have had a few discussions in the past about the issues around ODSS. Madam Mayor, you're absolutely right. We do understand the concerns, and we are listening. There are linkages being made all the time with the OPP with respect to many matters. Parking and school safety is definitely one of them. The OPP have been great to deal with respect to organizing school blitzes and trying to be there. They have communicated to us the same thing that the Deputy Mayor said. They're perfectly content to assist, but they're not always available because they're just dealing with a big geography with a certain amount of resources. So with respect to the OPP, I would say that they're doing everything they can, and there's been great relationships built there. With respect to bylaw enforcement providing warnings, I know that I'm not there in every situation, but I know that the feedback that I get is that people drive off quite quickly before they're even able to put the date on the ticket. So sometimes it can be a public education piece. We want to start off on the right foot and gain that good relationship with the drivers. But a lot of times as we are going to start issuing a ticket and they just drive away with not so nice words to say to our officers. So our officers are definitely aware of the issues and they are putting their minds to school safety.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Jackson. And if you can just state your name and address, and then the floor is yours.
My name is James Jackson. I live at 50 Carlton Drive. What else was it you want to know? Okay. And I used to do bylaw for Toronto Appeal, and yeah, I've had some threats and even had beer balls thrown at me, so I get it. Yeah. Actually, the thing that I'm coming up to address today actually has to do with our new transit hub. The thing that I've noticed about it, that it's actually not very accessible. When it was designed, I'm wondering if they actually had somebody who, even on, we should have somebody on town staff who does advise on accessibility matters. We have our sidewalks on Center Street and Dawson are on the opposite sides of the transit hub. So when people get off and they have to go to the sidewalks or whatever, they're going to be jaywalking to get across to the sidewalks. Or even worse is we have that Edelbrock Center, which is for employment. People go in there to use the computers, print out their resumes, and yada, yada, yada. Social services. We don't even have a pathway or a walkway to get up to it from the transit hub. So people are going to come to wanting to go to Edelbrock, and they can't get up to it. Now, when winter comes, we're going to have all that snow, so they can't travel through all that snow. So that means they're going to go out onto the road, walk up the road to go back into the driveway of Edelbrock, which then makes it more of a liability that if they get hit by a car or whatever, because we didn't offer them the accessibility or the access to get to Edelbrock. That's why I thought that when the plan came apart, if they had somebody who was giving them advice on accessibility matters like that, they could have pointed that out right away, and that the sidewalk could have already been put into place right away. And then that way, when somebody does get off the bus, they just go right across the sidewalk and don't even come off the property and continue on straight into Edelbrock. This way, it's safety is an utmost concern, I thought, for the town of citizens. We just finished talking about that with the bylaw. So that's just my 2 cents and my thoughts on that. And it was my another thought that maybe we should have somebody, even a consultation on town staff who handles with accessibility matters or advice, like an accessibility advisor. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Koslek, do you have a comment that you could make on that?
Through your worship, thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll take it back and take a look at it. And I know there was discussions with the county to look at being able to use the washroom facilities there. And they had concerns at one point about having access to the building, but we'll follow up with them to see if it is an opportunity to build a walkway in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Koslek. Thanks, Mr. Jackson. Deputy Mayor?
If I could, so I think that's spot on, those comments. So I walk that area now too, because we have our county council meetings over there and happen to go up, and it is quite glaring. And the other thing, if I could, Mr. Koslek, that's glaring to that area, there's no curbs in the area there either. There's one side has a sidewalk, the other side doesn't. It is quite a strange area there, and I meant to call you and ask, but here's Mr. Jackson bringing it up now. But that whole section right from where our beautiful new hub is up to the county building and around the county building is it's strange at best. I'm just wondering if we could look into that and see.
Mr. Kozlak?
Yeah, through your worship, we'll take a look at it and see what can be done. It may have to wait until we reconstruct the road in the area to put the curb and sidewalk in, but we'll take a look at it and see what can be done in the area.
And Mr. Jackson, as for your other comment, just to bring that up, during the last budget process, one of the potential FTEs to be hired was to be an accessibility coordinator / DEI coordinator. And when we sent it back to staff to do an organizational review, that'll be one of the things that that company that presented to us today will be taking into consideration. Because I know when they reached out to me for consultation, I had told them about that position and the importance of it in moving accessibility matters and also equity matters forward. So I'm confident that'll probably come forward as a recommendation from the consultants that we hired for the organizational review.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Was there any additional question period items? Mr. Smith, go ahead. Name and address for the record and just make sure the mic is on.
Hey, Matthew Smith, 38 McCarthy Street. It was just mentioned now, so I just want to bring up a point, Mr. Kozlak. If I'm not mistaken, one of the plans, one of the options presented for the transit terminal was a sidewalk between the Edelbrock Center and where the buses will unload. I think that was one of the design options, wasn't it? There's a couple different options presented, and that was one of them.
Through your worship, I believe there is a sidewalk connecting from the road to road as part of the design.
No, from the building to where the people will be unloading off the buses. That's what Mr. Jackson had just brought up. I know that was one of the design options.
I don't recall seeing a design with that, but I'd follow up with staff who are part of the design process.
Okay, so anyway.
Oh, I'm not sure either. There were some different designs brought forward, but I know ultimately it came down to the county's approval because it was county land that we were using. So it came subject to county council's approval.
Yeah. I just clearly remember seeing that design option and I thought, well, that's a great idea. And then didn't happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, my question is what exactly had brought about the staff reports specifically to remove the question period? Because obviously all the councillors had voted it down. So it wasn't a council-driven initiative. I guess this was something that staff had come up on their own.
Madam Clerk can speak to kind of where the procedural bylaw changes have come from. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The impetus for bringing forward the different recommendations within that report, we're mostly looking at how we can create more efficient meetings so that council was able to have a streamlined decision-making process. That was really the impetus for that report. It wasn't from our estimation, we were retaining many of the avenues for engaging with council. So it was certainly not. It was not an attempt to get rid of an avenue for the public to address council. It was just looking at how we can streamline the process for council meetings.
And the only additional piece I would add to that is that the reason that it came to the clerk's department at all was because there's a bylaw review process where we look at all the different bylaws that exist in the town of Orangeville, and it was time for the procedural bylaw to be looked at because it hasn't been looked at since 2017. So it was on the calendar to be reviewed, which is what flagged it to be looked at in the first place.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me use question period to ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Ugolini. Name and address for the record as per standard procedure.
That I mentioned about 2 hours ago.
Yep.
Rick Ugolini, 19 Cedar Drive.
Thank you.
Bylaw. I've mentioned this before, back a few months ago. Now, bylaw is strictly a complaint-based issue. Now, is there any chance in the future that bylaw can drive around and see things instead of neighbor turning on neighbor?
Madam Clerk, do you want to take that one?
Thank you, Your Worship. So at this point in time, bylaw only proactively enforces parking and graffiti. Everything else is on a complaint basis. A big part of that is just service level expectations. So if bylaws to become proactive in different service areas, then that would inevitably mean just a need for more resources with respect to bylaw.
Thank you.
Now, I know you're pretty short with bylaw officers at the moment, but is there any chance in the future, instead of a complaint base, they can drive around and see that people have paved over their whole front yard and there's cars parked on the grass in their front yard or across sidewalks? Like, you know, you see this every day. It's no different than the schools, you know, with the parking problems.
I think, as Madam Clerk said, that would require a service level change on behalf of council. So that would have to come forward as a budget recommendation that council would then add additional service level to the bylaw department for proactive enforcement of X, Y, and Z. Right now, they're doing it for parking.
Would there not be more money involved, like the town bring in more revenue from bylaw going around and finding things on their own rather than complaint based?
There would be more revenue, but there would also be more cost because we'd have to have more people on staff to do it. So it would have to be a balance of both, and it would have to come forward as a service level change.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there any additional questions from members of the gallery? Yeah, Deputy Mayor?
You know, it's so interesting because neighbors don't want to turn neighbors in. It's an uncomfortable situation. And just if anybody's wondering, I think one of the highest complainers in Orangeville is sitting right here talking right now. So I frequently let bylaw know that people haven't cut their grass or have let things go to decay, especially on our main streets. I think our town should look in a certain way. And when I don't see someone looking after their property in a way that I think is appropriate, I phone bylaw and I make a complaint, and complaint is issued and acted upon. And I would encourage other citizens to do the same. I think it's really important that grasses are cut and things are looking in a special way, especially if you're a business owner. And if you're hearing it, business owners that perhaps are on Broadway, I've called on you. So you should look after your properties. Anyway, I would encourage other citizens to do the same.
Thank you. Was there additional questions from members of the public? Yep, go ahead up. Again, turn on the mic, state your name and address, please.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Edith Baker. I live 27 First Street, and the reason I'm here, I asked this question the previous council because it came up. It's about First Street and Elizabeth Street. I've been living there over 15 years, and I'm seeing how crazy is the traffic, how dangerous. People don't care. And my question is if the town is going to do 2 lanes, so one can go straight, one can turn, or any budget and consideration to change it, because that street, that corner, my opinion, is the second busiest in Orangeville and one of the most dangerous. You can ask the cross guard when children goes across how many times she was almost hit because people don't watch. So my opinion, I'm not a planner, but if it would be 2 lane, 1 turning, or maybe light changing, it should have the Orangeville safety.
2 lanes on First Street?
No.
On Elizabeth. On Elizabeth at First Street.
I don't know. It's just an idea. Maybe make it safer that corner because there's lots of accidents.
Okay, Mr. Koslak will take that one.
Yeah, through your worship. One of the things we're looking at doing in 2024 is a master plan for our road network, just to look at our future traffic demands and be able to make plans like this to set up a capital program. So next year we'll be doing a study on all the roads to identify where there needs to be turning lanes, any widenings, and that'll set up the plan. It won't be implemented immediately, but it'll set up sort of a 10-year plan to implement it. So we'll be discussing it in more detail then and doing
Perfect.
counts.
Thank you, Mr. Koslak. Thank you very much. Okay, we have come to the portion of the meeting now where we are at bylaws. The recommendation is that the bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. 19.1 is a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-75, being a bylaw to delegate certain powers and duties under the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001 C25. 19.2 is a bylaw to amend bylaw 2017-64, being a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and its committees. 19.3 is a bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-11, being a bylaw to designate and regulate fire routes. 19.4 is a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-79, being a bylaw to regulate and license towing service operators, tow truck drivers, and vehicle storage yard facilities. 19.5 is a bylaw to authorize the entering into an execution of service agreements with each of the Town of Grand Valley, Town of Shelburne, and Town of Mono for providing licensing, administration, and bylaw enforcement services of a vehicle for hire bylaw. And 19.6 is the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its regular council meeting held today, September 11th. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews and Councillor Prendergast, questions or comments? Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide additional clarification that at 19.2, we will be amending Section 1 and Section 2 of the amending bylaw to reflect the decision of council earlier. I just wanted to confirm that point.
Thank you very much. Additional questions or comments? All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Stevens and Councillor McIntosh. Okay, all in favor? Carried unanimously. Have a good night, everyone.